state's attorney. Let's see, mic check. Okay, I think we're good. The sound kind of went out for like a second, but okay, 24th of October. The Knight Errant himself. Oh, have you been watching from the gallery, Mr. Jones? I've been on the edge of my seat the entire time. Courtroom trials are fascinating affairs, as a spectator at least. I'm glad you've been enjoying yourself. I have to ask. What on earth is going on? It makes no sense. What's this professor business all about? He doesn't look like any professor I've ever met before. Who even is he? Of course. You were in Germany already 10 years ago. Yes, the professor. When I discovered he was the one who had been abducted, a sense of foreboding stirred within me. But who knew the monster would come knocking at your door? My heartful sympathies. As it turns out, Lord Van Zeeks is even more intimately tied to this case than any of us realize, isn't he? Yes, how true. His great friend from university is in the dock. And now a waxwork of the killer who took his esteemed brother's life makes an appearance too. I imagine even the shrewd Mr. Reaper failed to foresee that kick in the teeth. An extraordinary move on your part, my dear fellow, to throw that in front of the man. You make it sound deliberate. I can't help feeling that this professor case is really very puzzling. Oh yes, in what particular matter? Well, there's Mr. Drebber, Dr. Sid, and Lord Van Zeeks. It seems that everybody in the trial has a link to the case somehow. Yes, in fact, I alone am not a member of the set. Though that leaves me as an empty set, all alone with no intersection to any other. Excuse me? Dr. Sid! Dr. Courtney Sid, nee Stevens. Good day to you. Hello, Sholmes. That was very shrewd of you. What in particular, pray? You requested that 10-year-old autopsy report from Gregson, didn't you? Why would you assume such a thing? Because Gregson told me. To think it's been 10 years. 10 years in the laboratory, wielding my scalpel. I smell of nothing but corpses and disinfectant. The policeman on the jury had a lot to say about you as it happens, Dr. Sid. And I've accused you of being complicit in what happened. I'm hoping that you'll take the stand and tell the truth about what really happened. That certainly won't be possible. Lord Van Zeeks won't be summoning me as a witness. Lord Strongheart has forbidden it. Lord Strongheart? The Pandora's box you were warned about is the professor case. But please don't make the mistake of thinking you'll get any information about it out of me. But attempting to hide from the truth, that's cowardice. I've always fought crime in the way that I see fit. I have no regrets, none at all. And that's all I came here to say. So, good day to you. She mentioned it too, this Pandora's box. Whatever does it all mean? There's really no cause for concern. I assure you, when the trial resumes, the meaning will become all too apparent, whether you like it to or not. Huh. Now then, I believe it's almost time. I must make my way back to the public gallery. The edge of my seat awaits. I think maybe you're enjoying yourself a little too much. Ah, yes, one word of warning before I go. If, in the course of the trial this afternoon, you perceive even a shadow of doubt about the truth, don't let it out of your sight. Pursue it like a dog with a bone. To the bitter end, you understand. Do not falter, whatever may come to pass. All right, I understand. Thank you. Good, I shall make myself scarce then. I purchased a bar of caramel earlier, so I shall be gnawing on that as you gnaw away the truth. What did that warning from Mr. Shums really mean, I wonder? Especially the bit about whatever may come to pass. It's time for the final chapter then. I'm determined to find the truth, no matter what. Roll 40. In the name of Her Majesty the Queen, I hereby reconvene the proceedings of this court. Counsels for the defense and prosecution are you ready and able to continue? The prosecution is ready, my lord. Yes, my lord. The defense is also ready. As the court is aware, the case under our scrutiny began with a damaging incident at the Great Exhibition. Yet we now find ourselves embroiled in the details of a convicted felon who was sent to the gallows a decade ago. This trial has certainly defied all expectation, as seems to be the fate of all trials in which this Nipponese is involved, my lord. So then, let us begin our exploration of the defense's assertion that the waxwork was cardinally involved in this matter. Lord Van Zeeks? My lord. Are we still awaiting the arrival of Madame Tusples? Not at all. She is in the antechamber as we speak and ready to be summoned. Very well. Bring in the witness. At once, my lord. Bailiff, show Madame Tusples to the stand. Things are about to become a lot more intense. If Drebber is responsible, as I'm sure he is, it means he must have had an accomplice in Dr. Sib. We will find the truth, Mr. Mouse Boy. And what connects the pair of them is the waxwork. God. And what connects the pair of them is the waxwork. Yes, the model of the professor. Thanks that. God, I can't read. That's the key to the link between these otherwise unrelated individuals. It's a tenuous link, admittedly, but at present, it's all we have to go on. Oh my god. State your name and occupation for the court, please. My name is Madame Esmeralda Tusples. I'm a waxwork artisan, and the proprietress of the Madame Tusples Museum of Waxwork. You will have to pardon me for working as I testify. My new exhibit must open very soon. Oh, so he finally gets a statue, does he? Now, there are 2 of them in the world. Oh my, what expression is she carving onto that base? A number of days ago, a particular waxwork model was stolen from your museum. Can you confirm this? Oui, that is true. At first, we believed it had been kidnapped. A waxwork model kidnapped? Yes, my lord. There was a demand for ransom money left behind by the culprit. However, according to what I have just been told outside the courtroom, that was not the true reason. I understand it was utilized as a substitute for the body of a murder victim. At present, that is no more than conjecture proposed by the defense. This is the victim of the case in question, Mr. Odie Asmund. But of course, I know him well. He's a part of my odious personages exhibit. I detest to say what is evident, but Mr. Asmund does not resemble the professor at all. Yes, but perhaps their faces are very similar. Are you suggesting that we should see now the damasked visage of the professor? I have here the key, but it is strictly forbidden to open the lock.
This is absurd.
Pardon?
I don't know what face you've carved into your fancy figure beneath the mask, but clearly it won't be that of the actual killer. Indeed, the man's identity was never made public after all. The trial took place in a closed court. The proceedings were strictly confidential. The condemned man was similarly executed. His identity remains a close-guarded national secret. There is no possible way that a repository of Dodgery exhibits can get its hands on that information.
Cool them all. It would seem you are unaware of the Tespel's principles.
The what principles?
The family Tespels has always prided itself on sculpting its models à la perfection. Every detail, including the visage, is fashioned with complete fidelity. Et voilà our principles. There's a well-known legend about the Tespels' waxwork from the time of the French Revolution. A member of the Tespels family is said to have made a waxwork of the queen who was executed. Oui, that is true. It was a century ago now. I believe the queen's face was carved in the minutes following her death, actually at the guillotine site. You are correct. The model is on display still today in the House of Horrors. We Tespels will stop at nothing to obtain a faithful replica of our subjects.
Dear me, a somewhat disturbing tenacity of purpose.
It's the only way to obtain a truly lifelike representation of the subject. And it has been my family's secret for generations.
Do you mean to say that beneath that mask?
Oui, the true visage of the killer is there.
This is ludicrous. It's out of the question.
The professor spread terror throughout Great Britain. As a result, the Madame Tespel's special exhibit remains extremely popular even today. The killer, emerging from his own grave, it is a sight to behold. You should come.
I think, madam, it would be beneficial to hear your formal testimony on this matter. You will explain every detail of this macabre model and your personal involvement in its creation.
With pleasure. The special exhibit in the House of Horrors is based on a rumor that shocked society in London. An impression of the visage was taken directly from the corpse in accordance with Tespel's family principles. Blah. I enlisted the aid of the gravedigger and created a mold for the head in the cemetery just before the interment. I hid myself until he gave me a signal. I was there for a very long time that night. As dawn approached, I was very worried that I could be discovered.
The gravedigger! The man sanctioned this!
Oui, I will do all that is necessary to achieve the true resemblance my family is celebrated for. Nobody else knew, only the gravedigger. What harm did it do,
So you truly saw it? The face of that monster?
Naturally, I was aware at the time that his identity was a secret. But Tespels would not be Tespels if we did not insist on absolute fidelity to our sculptures.
I don't believe this. I myself have seen the special exhibit at your museum, madam. A truly blood-curdling scene in which the murderer is emerging from his own grave.
The scene it depicts was the subject of many rumors in London 10 years ago. I have here a newspaper from the time. Hello. The special exhibit was based upon the picture in this article. It was the most detailed account of what happened as reported by the eyewitness who saw it. Okay.
Man rises from the grave. It's too absurd for words.
Let me look at it. So, Mr. Drebber was the grave digger? I can't really tell what it is, but it looks like a cat girl. And, I like cat girls, so, yay. The public enjoy absurdity, monsieur. That is why I have reproduced the scene as carefully as possible in my museum.
And it's a waxwork from that exhibit that was stolen some days before the incident at the Great Exhibition, wasn't it?
That is correct. The professor you see before you here.
Most puzzling. Counsel for the defense, proceed with the cross-examination. This waxwork links Drebber to Dr. Sid, and there has to be some reason for that, which hasn't yet come to light. But I'll find it. I'll get to the bottom of what really happened. I'll prove that Dr. Sid and Drebber were in on this crime together.
Yeah, I don't follow the VTuber, trend. Special exhibits. It wouldn't hurt to press all of them, I guess.
That rumor would be
a 10-year-old tale now, but one that no Londoner would ever forget.
Right, I know just what you're talking about, I think.
Of course, it couldn't be anything else.
Yes, that story will never disappear.
The tale of the condemned killer rising from the dead. That is the central attraction of my House of Horrors. The rumor was whispered all over the city, and it was like this. It was in Lowgate Cemetery behind the prison in the dead of night after the execution of the killer. The interred professor slid back the stone slab covering his tomb and emerged from his grave. A young man who witnessed this felt a scream welling up inside him. But an instant later, he heard an ear-splitting gunshot from over his shoulder. The bullet struck the emerging corpse, and he fell motionless once more. The scream finally found its way from the mouth of the young witness, who turned and ran for his life.
The corpse climbed out of his own grave?
And then somebody shot him? Who was it? Nobody knows, even today. But remember, it was just a rumor, perhaps nothing more than a ghost story. The good people of London, they love stories like this. That is why it was in every newspaper across the capital.
But was it just a story? I mean, this is exactly the scene that can be seen today at your museum, isn't it?
Oui, the special exhibit was modeled on that very illustration. For a while afterwards, the contents of that article were reproduced in every newspaper imaginable. Madam, might I say something? Please go ahead, mademoiselle. When something is described as a rumor, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's entirely made up. I believe that often rumors contain elements of the truth. I see that people from the East could be just as astute as the people of Europe. Can we be sure, for instance, that the professor's execution was successful? It is not possible for the dead to come back to life.
Sorry?
10 years ago, I was there in Lowgate Cemetery, after the criminal known as the Professor was killed by hanging. I took a wax impression of his visage from the corpse just before it was interred. So I can assure you, the man was dead.
I see. It would certainly appear that the condemned man suffered the intended fate.
Alright, that took a long time for basically nothing.
Hold it!
Is that true of every waxwork in your museum, then?
It is, assuming the subject is dead, of course. Live subjects have to cooperate in a similar way. I have letters from imprisoned criminals all the time, you know.
What sort of letters?
When my time comes, please make a waxwork of me.
No.
My museum is famous, monsieur. To be made into a waxwork is an honor, and for some criminals, a symbol of status, even.
Because nothing says hardened criminal better than wax.
And it is thanks to one killer in particular that my museum has gained such popularity in London. No. But, I've seen part of a playthrough of, like, the video game version of it, and I liked it. But I want to see The Walking Dead, the show. I saw this one clip of this, like, little girl. I don't know how far into it is, but she, like, killed her sister or something, and then I guess the mom or whatever shot her. I don't know, but, I like, what's the word? I don't know what the word is, but I like stuff like that. I've heard of the star, Special Elizabeth, of course, the Professor.
Whose form you claim to have captured by taking an impression from the actual corpse.
There are no exceptions to the principles of Tusples. I enlisted the aid of the gravedigger. Okay.
Hold it!
Surely that's illegal, isn't it? It would seem the proprietress of this repository of novelties was blinded by monetary greed.
It had nothing to do with money. The man is part of London's criminal history. That is why I had to sculpt him to record this history. It is the raison d'etre of the Tusples Museum.
But if the man was convicted in a closed court and sent for immediate execution, then surely nobody but the members of the judiciary present know the killer's true identity.
I assure you, behind that mask is hidden the true face of the Professor.
Do you realize what you're saying? The Professor's identity is a national secret.
I understand. And now that the truth about the special exhibit has been revealed, it must perhaps close.
Of course it will. As will your entire museum if you don't tread very carefully, madam.
That could be another interesting chapter in the history of my family, I think, don't you?
So 10 years ago, on the night of the Professor's execution, you took a wax impression of his face from the corpse.
Oui, exactement. French?
Okay, what was this signal? You were there longer than you expected to be.
I had some difficulties in capturing the subject's form correctly. As I removed the mask, the mouth of the cadaver fell open and I had some problems with the chin.
Dare I ask?
The man had been dead for a short while already, you see. His muscles were relaxing, and consequently his chin would not align itself correctly. Oh dear, what a horrible thought. Under normal circumstances, I would have an assistant with me. However, that night I was alone, and as a consequence, I missed my preferred window of time.
What do you mean?
When I take the impression of the visage of a cadaver, I always wait until 3 hours after death.
Why 3 hours? Is that amount of time significant?
It is because of rigor mortis.
Wiggly mortis?
It's the name given to a phenomenon that occurs in recently deceased bodies. As a rule, 3 hours post-death, the muscles in the body begin to stiffen. By approximately 10 hours post-death, the entire body is completely rigid and inflexible. And then, from that point on, the muscles slowly start to revert to their relaxed state. The effect is often used to estimate the time of death when a body is discovered.
Well, that was an education, if a slightly scary one.
As Mademoiselle says, rigor mortis commences 3 hours after death, and it stops in the jaw.
I see. So that's why you wait.
Before that time, the mouth falls open, and it is very difficult to do my work.
It's getting hard for me to do my work with all this talk of corpses. I wonder about that information the courts just heard from Madame Tusble's. It's probably significant. Information about rigor mortis that you just shared with us. Would you mind including it in your formal testimony? I believe it could be significant, you see.
Of course, I do not mind at all. I can't help feeling that after this latest topic, the atmosphere in the courtroom has become extremely grave.
This is no time for jokes, Mrs. Otto. Madam, kindly amend your testimony as discussed.
Monsieur, it took me a very long time because it was before.
Hold it!
Rigor mortis being the phenomenon you described whereby the corpse becomes stiff after death. I think you said that it starts at the jaw about 3 hours post-death, is that right?
Oui, c'est ça. Of course, the exact duration depends a little on the season.
I didn't realize a waxwork artisan would be so well versed in the subject.
No, that is not elementary knowledge in the field of legal medicine.
Well, I had no idea about it, but maybe I won't admit to my ignorance about forensic science.
I could ask my father to give you a very simple primer if you like.
I think corpses should be your domain. I'm not good with them.
Oh dear, I'll do my very best.
Okay, stone approach.
Hold it!
You say that dawn was approaching. What was the time of day then, approximately?
Well, I could not say, but when I left the cemetery with my utensils and wax, the morning light was becoming visible.
The execution took place on the 17th of June, which had the earliest sunrise of that year. Indeed it did. First light would have been at around 4:40 in the morning. That really is early.
The fact is, I had very little time, so I finished my work in a half hour. It was necessary to complete the impression and bury the body before daybreak, of course. If somebody had discovered me there, it would have been a catastrophe, so I had to hurry.
Is it me, or does Mr. Shum seem to be taking shape more quickly now, too? You certainly appear to go to extraordinary lengths for your work, madam. I wonder, is what she just said particularly significant? Probably. Madam, those details about how long it took you to complete the sculpture in the early sunrise, could you include them in your testimony? I believe they may be significant.
Of course, if you would like me to. You're quite right, Mr. Naruhodo. It is intriguing. A sunrise at 4 in the morning would be absolutely unimaginable at home, wouldn't it?
That's not quite what I meant by significant. Kindly amend your formal testimony then, madam.
With pleasure, my lord. I hurried to finish my work in the half hour before sunrise, then I left as soon as the corpse was interred.
Hold it!
Did you have reason to believe you might be discovered once the sun came up or something?
I had paid the gravedigger money to keep my little secret, of course. But with the morning light, I knew that the warden from the prison would commence his patrol of the area.
Couldn't you just have paid off the warden too then?
I had already paid the gravedigger, as I said. You cannot buy the silence of everyone, or the secret is no longer a secret.
The sunrise was at 4:40 a.m. that day, which means that it would have been around 4 when you began your sculpting work.
Oui, that must be correct. That would be when the gravedigger gave me the signal to come out of hiding.
So, that's all I have to go on.
What's your feeling, Mr. Naruhodo?
For some reason, Dr. Sid went along with Trevor's plan. Now, if that's really true, then the professor is the only other thing we know of that links the pair of them. So I feel sure that waxwork must be a clue to this mystery somehow.
In that case, we must use this cross-examination to uncover exactly what it means. Otherwise, the jurors are sure to revert their leanings and the trial will be over.
I agree, but interestingly, uncovering what the professor has to do with all this means more to Lord Van Zeeks than anyone. That's the impression I'm getting anyway.
Yes, as do I.
After all, he has a profound connection to the professor as well. Okay. Let me look again at what I have. Contract. Investor, Mr. Annual, your managers in the contract, etc. Land labor and materials, construction. Mr. Trevor is to receive 30%. Based on a rumor. Person of the visit. Say a gravedigger. Is there any time stamps here? Wait, hold on a second. Odie Asman. Odie Asman. There's the gravedigger, Mr. Asman. Okay. Death by hanging. Confirmed at midnight. Okay. So.
Objection!
Madame Tesples is already sitting in. I have here an autopsy report that was filed 10 years ago now. It confirms the death of the professor following his execution at the gallows. And is that a problem? I believe that it is, because your testimony and a particular detail in the report completely contradict one another. Quoi? Are you going to explain yourself, my Nipponese friend? According to her testimony, Madame Tesples was creating her wax impression just before dawn, and at that time rigor mortis had not yet set in. Am I correct so far, madam? You are, yes. As I said, the stiffening of the jaw is the first sign of rigor mortis 2 to 3 hours after death. But the man's chin was limp, so he could not have been dead for a long time. But on the other hand, if you look at Dr. Sid's report, it quite clearly states the following. Death by hanging confirmed at midnight, 17th of June. No. If the professor indeed died at midnight that day, then by the time you were sculpting his face, rigor mortis would already have set in. Oui, yes, you were right. The chin, it would have been completely stiff. In other words, this report is wrong.
Objection!
No coroner makes mistakes when recording the time of death. The very idea is absurd. In that case, there's only one possible conclusion. The execution didn't actually take place at the stated time. Impossible. Order. Counsel, this is beyond folly. Not only do you indict the author of the report, Dr. Sid, but you also implicate members of staff at Barclay Prison where the execution took place. By heck, extraordinary. Not in my day.
Objection!
My learned friend appears to have overlooked one very crucial fact. What fact? The professor died that night, without question. He did, of course he did. I moved the man's limp jaw with my own hands. There was... Yes, the professor died that night. But what if he didn't die at the gallows? Didn't die at... Are you insane? What exactly are you suggesting did happen in that case? It's almost impossible to believe, but it would explain the link between Dr. Sid, the professor, and that one other person of interest. I have evidence that will explain exactly what I'm suggesting happened that night. Counsel, present the evidence at once. Evidence that allegedly explains what really happened on the night of the... Probably that.
Take that!
What happened that night is written very plainly in this newspaper article. Executed criminal returns in the dead of night at local cemetery. You're suggesting it was a corpse coming back from the dead now? Well, if this article is to be believed, yes. The professor, assumed dead following his execution, emerged from the grave and was killed again.
Objection!
Don't be a fool. That's simply a rumor published by the gutter press. Can you be certain of that? Are you serious? The point is, as the article says, there was a witness to what happened. My word, yes indeed.
Mathaway, the young man who stole into the cemetery by chance that night.
Objection!
Of course there was a witness. The story didn't write itself, but obviously the man made it all up. And in any case, this was 10 years ago now. There would surely be no hope of finding him.
Objection!
On the contrary, my lord, we all know this witness well. Esmond! What? Or is it Drebber? Are you suggesting, counsel, that you have identified the person in question? That you know who claims to have seen the utterly incredible events take place? Yes, my lord. In fact, you could say that he's right here before my very eyes. You would substantiate your latest claim now then, counsel. Who is the alleged witness of the staggering scene in the cemetery? Him, right? His name's on the thing.
Take that!
I must say, I'm quite staggered by the scene I see before me now, counsel. The young man is okay, so Drebber then? So why is Mr. Asmund's name on him? Perhaps you should keep your eyes open when you collapse on the bench, for safety's sake. Who's the alleged witness? Okay.
Take that!
The man in question is Mr. Enoch Drebber. Drebber. The previous witness. The special exhibit in the House of Horrors at Madame Tespel's Museum of Waxwork recreates the decade-old scene in great detail. A condemned criminal emerging from the grave, and beside the tomb, a young man with a lantern stumbling upon the terrifying sight. And that young man is a 10-year younger Mr. Enoch Drebber. Order, order, order. Surely not, counsel. Drebber was there, in Lowgate Cemetery.
What is all this talk about Mr. Drebber? Is the name significant?
Of course, Madame Tespels doesn't know, does she? Yes, it's extremely significant, madam. To your situation as well, in fact.
What situation?
The theft of the Professor Waxwork from your museum some days ago was perpetrated by the very same man.
No! But that would mean...
Madame Tespels, it would appear you know the name Enoch Drebber.
Yes, I know it. But from long ago, in the past.
What?
Oh my!
Good gracious. Explain yourself. Tell us everything you know.
Yes, of course. The story of the young man and the terrible sight he witnessed in the cemetery 10 years ago was published in every single newspaper in London and throughout Great Britain. However, in all of the articles, the witness was simply described as a certain young man. No details were published about his identity. His name was never revealed. That is, apart from in one newspaper. The Daily Circus. It is the paper from which comes the article I have already shown the court.
You're saying that his full name was only publicized in that article? Goodness me, yes, here it is. The university student who experienced this shocking event is Mr. Enoch Drebber, a disciple of science at the University of London and a resident of its student dorms. Unbelievable!
When I read the article, I went to meet with the man. His discovery of the condemned criminal coming back to life in the cemetery in the dead of night would make a perfect exhibit for my House of Horrors, whether it was the truth or not.
I see. So you went to meet Mr. Drebber in order to sculpt waxwork of the man, did you?
Exactement. He was studying science at the University of London in those days. He was just a poor student. I paid him £5 to model for the waxwork, and since that time it has been in my museum to recreate the scene of terror from the cemetery.
So, 10 years ago, a young man appealed to the public about an extraordinary event he witnessed. A criminal who had been put to death, re-emerging from his grave in the middle of the night. but the public treated his claim as nothing more than an amusing anecdote that was soon forgotten. 10 years later, the same man steals a waxwork model of the executed criminal, ostensibly to use as a body double for the victim in the case we're discussing here today. Even though the waxwork's build is a poor match for the victim, and its face is obscured by a mask. So the question is, why would the man do such a thing? Which brings us to 3 days ago, when the birdcage crashed into the Crystal Tower. If the birdcage had in fact contained not the body of Mr. Asmund, but that same waxwork, the coroner from Scotland Yard who investigated Dr. Sith would have noticed immediately. And yet, she submitted this autopsy report for the victim, which the court has seen earlier. Why? Because the waxwork was that of the professor, is that what you're saying? Dr. Sith put her name to a document confirming the death of a condemned criminal who was still alive. A criminal whose apparent resurrection was witnessed by Mr. Drebber. But that misconduct was a deadly secret the coroner would do anything to protect. Which is precisely why Mr. Drebber used that particular waxwork as the body double. Ugh. My lord, this court must summon Dr. Sith to the stand. The defense is determined to find out exactly how the coroner and Mr. Drebber are connected. But according to the missive I received this morning to the prosecutor's office, Dr. Sith is unable to participate in these proceedings. Is that not the case?
She told us so herself, didn't she?
Lord Van Zieks won't be summoning me as a witness. Lord Strongheart has forbidden it. But I can, right? Lord Strongheart, the Pandora's box you were warned about is the Professor case. But please don't make the mistake of thinking you'll get any information about it out of me. Something happened on the night of that killer's execution 10 years ago, and surely nobody would want to get to the bottom of that more than Lord Van Zieks. The prosecution calls for the instructions in that missive to be scrapped. But Lord Van Zieks, the missive was issued from the Lord Chief Justice's office.
Objection!
The assigned prosecutor has the final say on policy in any particular trial. In other words, me. Yes. Let Enoch Drebber and Dr. Sith both take the stand together. Order, order, order. Very well, I will uphold your request. Bailiff, send a subpoena with immediate effect addressed to Dr. Sith and the Forensic Investigation Team. The one is compelled to attend on Her Majesty's orders. Alright then, Enoch Drebber and Dr. Sith. If they weren't colluding with one another, this crime could never have been committed. I'm just a stone's throw away, I can feel it. The truth behind all this is about to come out. Thank you for your attendance at such short notice, Dr. Sith. I'm disappointed in you, Lord Van Zieks. You completely betrayed the agreed policy of both Scotland Yard and the prosecutor office. Betrayal is not in my nature, as long as the truth isn't compromised. If it is, if there's even a hint of wrongdoing, then no matter whom it concerns or disgruntles, I will pursue the matter to the bitter end, as would any prosecutor worth his salt. Mr. Drebber, you took the victim's life by means of a machine that you constructed in your workshop. And Dr. Sith, as the investigating coroner, you were the first on the scene to examine the victim's body. It is the belief of the defense that you collaborated with each other and were both complicit in this crime. And where's your evidence? At present, we have no definitive evidence, but we do have a very significant clue. What are you talking about? I'm talking, of course, about the waxwork. This model of the killer known as the Professor, who was sentenced to death 10 years ago. You don't need to tell me. I witnessed the man's execution with my own eyes and officially pronounced him dead. That remains to be seen. Is that so? According to newspaper reports from the time on the night following his execution, the killer came back to life. Don't waste my time. And the sole witness to that mysterious event was you, Mr. Drebber, wasn't it? If what you saw in the graveyard that night 10 years ago wasn't some chilling fiction but reality, it would make you privy to a very great secret of Dr. Sid's. A secret so profound it could compel the coroner to agree to collaborate in your evil scheme, in fact. Mr. Drebber, tell the court. Tell everyone the truth of what you saw that night in Lowgate Cemetery. So he was the student who saw it. You can see the resemblance, actually, can't you? With the man in Madame Tespel's, I mean. Surely he's not going to claim that's really what he saw, especially not after all those years. He was a research student at the University of London, was he? And a bit too clever for his own good, if you ask me. What an interesting twist. When at the time, not one person would take me seriously. Yet now here we are 10 years later, and suddenly my story matters, and in a court of law, too. Very well, then, if everyone so wishes. Let's be frank. I'll tell you the truth of what happened that night for what it's worth. So, Mr. Drebber, your testimony, please, about the events of that night 10 years ago. You will tell the court exactly what you stumbled across in Lowgate Cemetery. Yes, of course, as you wish. The reason I was in Lowgate Cemetery at all 10 years ago was for a spot of moonlighting, shall we say. Yes, the illustration in that newspaper article was based on what I witnessed that night. But thinking back now, I realized that I never actually saw the professor. Soon afterwards, I was visited by a young woman who sculpted a model of me from wax. Then I gave up my dream of becoming a scientist, and it was all because of that newspaper article. Wait a minute, you're claiming you didn't actually see the professor now? Of course, you'd have to have a screw loose if you believed a corpse could come back from the dead. But, so you're saying this article is not worth the paper it's printed on? I think that would describe it perfectly, yes. If the details in the article aren't true, it nullifies your argument for why Mr. Drebber and Dr. Sid would have been working together. So he's discrediting himself to cripple my argument. Tell me, witness. You claim to have been in the cemetery on some auxiliary business. Can you elaborate? That's right, grave robbing to be precise. As you know, Lowgate Cemetery is at the rear of Barclay Prison. So among students at the university, it had a reputation for being haunted by the ghosts of condemned convicts. Grave robbing, you say? Yes, exhuming fresh corpses to sell is reasonably lucrative. Of course, I never laid a finger on any valuables buried with the dead. So you were one of the so-called resurrectionists, a particularly unpleasant scourge on society. Actually, my fellows and I went by another name, the repurposers. That is quite beyond the pale. You would invite divine retribution, sir. Yes, well, I think I suffered retribution enough. The Daily Circus eventually unearthed my name and put it in print. It caused me a great many headaches. In the end, I had to leave the university. That was the only paper with a bad grace to identify me unambiguously, I might add. I see. Out of interest, who drew the illustration for this article? Ah, yes, that was the reporter who exposed me. He sketched that right in front of me as I described the scene. Mr. Asman. Obviously, as time ticked on, I bitterly regretted what I'd done. Claiming to have seen something I never truly saw. Foolish, very foolish. Well, counsel for the defense, you may proceed to the cross-examination now. At once, my lord.
Hold it!
By moonlighting, you mean grave robbing, do you? Surely you only need to look at the graveyard scene and my appearance to gauge the answer to that. The lantern and spade. But who on earth would want to buy a dead body? Any major hospital. A hospital? In order to better understand the human body, the study of anatomy is crucial to medical science. But there isn't a hospital in the world that has enough specimens to work with. Though obviously they can't openly express an interest in obtaining more by dubious means. As inspiring scientists, we young research students had no money to work with, as I'm sure you can imagine. So we made surreptitious arrangements with the hospital via some of our medical student acquaintances. We would never take anything of value from the graves. This was all for the furtherance of science, you see. That's what we all told ourselves every time we stole into the graveyard at night, spade in hand. You realize body snatching is a serious crime. If you were caught, you could expect the gravest of consequences. We students were caught between the hammer and the anvil. We needed funds for research. Professor Harebrain said exactly the same. I'm quite speechless at the apparent levity with which you revealed this abhorrent behavior. Well, if you wanted to know why I was there at Lowgate Cemetery, that's the reason. But I never expected it to end the way it did. That I regret to this day. Okay.
Hold it!
The strange happening at Lowgate Cemetery, which you now deny. Not entirely. I ran to fetch the police at the time, you know. I was shaking like a leaf. But they didn't believe a word of it. In fact, I was very nearly arrested myself. So you went to the papers instead. I started big with the London News, but unsurprisingly, they didn't want to know either. In the end, though, it was reporters from the gossip rags, the gutter press, that came to get my story. And it spread like the plague through the capital as gossip-hungry Londoners lapped up the tale. The story was in every single paper at the time, with the exception of some broadsheets. And yet only 2 or 3 of them actually interviewed me personally. Most of the accounts turned out to be very interpretive ghost stories. What about the article in the Daily Circus? That particular journalist found me at my dormitory. I don't know how, but he discovered my name. So I recounted to him exactly what had happened that night. And from your description, he drew this illustration. Precisely, that's how I learned that the condemned man was the infamous professor. Because the report told me so. I had no idea myself, you see. Newspaper reporters are wont to snoop around in matters that don't concern them. So the scene portrayed in the illustration is accurate then? Well, that now, I realize that I never actually saw the professor at all.
What are you talking about?
I think I explained already, didn't I? Millgate Cemetery is at the rear of Barclay Prison. So it was renowned among students at the university for being haunted by the ghost of condemned convicts. For some absurd reason, I was scared of the graveyard at night, and as a result, only too willing to believe that nonsense about the dead coming back to life. But you said you actually saw it. I said what I'd seen in my mind's eye. After all, resurrection is impossible, isn't it? You'd have to be unhinged to think otherwise. Unless, of course, you have some evidence that proves I encountered the professor that night. I don't know. Is there any material evidence that could show he really did see the professor?
If we have anything at all, Mr. Naruhodo.
I know, I need to present it against that irritatingly backtracking statement of his. The point is, that night was a pivotal moment in my life. Soon afterwards... Okay. Do I show the camera, maybe? Mr. Trevor.
Objection!
Damn, okay.
Hold it!
That young woman being Madame Tuswell, of course. Precisely. I must say I didn't expect to run into her again like this 10 years later.
As I have explained, I went by the name published in the article, and comme ça, I found the man.
Yes, the article in the Daily Circus, I think you said. I was a poor student with barely a penny to my name at the time. And the young lady put £5 in front of me. So you readily consented to having a waxwork of yourself made and gave permission for it to be put on display. I did. I should sell what little I had to sell, I concluded.
Ah, oui, I remember now. I purchased something else from you that day, n'est-ce pas?
A camera? Did you? I can't say I remember. What was it, madam?
His camera.
Ah. Oh, yes, I made a point of taking it with me whenever I made an excursion into any cemetery. You took a camera with you, sir. To what end? To record the details of the bodies I disinterred. But I had no intention of ever visiting a graveyard again after that night, so I sold it. I see.
But I still have it, monsieur. It is part of the special exhibit in my House of Horrors. I am very meticulous about such details. It is the Tuswell's way. It would seem, then, that this is the very camera Mr. Trevor took with him to Millgate Cemetery on the night in question.
Yes, interesting. Now can I present the thing? Actual camera.
Objection!
Still?
Hold it!
This article, you mean? Published in the Daily Circus. Yes, somebody informed the dean that it was my name that appeared in the article, and carelessly let slip that night after night I was digging up graves. Hardly a model student, you might say. The university's reputation was execrably defiled, and I was expelled as a result.
Mon Dieu, I had no idea.
And having been run out of university, you found employment in a somewhat specialist trade. You combined your knowledge of science with knowledge of stage magic to create various experimental machines intended to demonstrate never-before-seen technology. And you used those deceptive machines to trick the government and private investors into giving you money. Professor Albert Herring was just your latest victim, wasn't he? Whatever are you talking about? I have no recollection of doing anything of the sort. What's Trevor up to? Why would he suddenly change his tune and recant his statement, his claim?
I wonder if perhaps it's because his circumstances have changed now.
What circumstances?
Well, if he admits to having seen the professor emerging alive from his grave 10 years ago, it will expose a secret in Dr. Sid's past that she would desperately want to hide.
Yes, of course. If Trevor and Dr. Sid are working together now, then if Trevor were to betray her, there would be no reason for her to continue to cooperate. In that case, there's only one way around it. I'll have to prove he really did see it. Prove he really did see the professor's corpse coming back from the dead as he originally claimed.
Yes, Mr. Naruhodo, exactly.
But how do I do that? I don't have the picture thingy. The glass thing. Never imagined a piece of evidence would be on display in Madame Tuscal's. She's very keen on everything being as true to life as possible, though, isn't she? So... Okay, 1 second. Okay.
Objection!
Sorry, Mr. Drebber, but I don't believe that. Don't believe what? Your latest claim. You did see the professor on that night 10 years ago. Oh dear, we seem to be at odds, but I was there and you were not. I know what I didn't see. The illustration with this article was drawn based upon what you told the journalist that you witnessed. A figure emerging from a tomb, wearing an iron mask. Yes, when the killer was tried 10 years ago, it was decided in the closed court's ruling that the man would wear the mask to hide his identity. It wasn't to be removed even during his execution and subsequent burial. Not even the prison wardens were to see the man's face. But obviously, the provision of this mask was not public knowledge. So, Mr. Drebber, as you just heard... A lowly student of the University of London certainly wouldn't have known about the condemned man's mask. So, unless you'd actually seen the professor that night, it's inconceivable that the artist would have included the mask in that illustration. Order, order. Well, Mr. Drebber. It's a vile scene, isn't it? If you look closely. And as I've already been at pains to point out, I was utterly petrified. Which is why I had it in my head that I'd seen such a blood-curdling sight. But afterwards, I came to my senses and realized that I'd been mistaken. You're still saying you didn't see it? If you're stubbornly sticking to that story, witness, then amend your testimony to explain exactly how you think your eyes deceived you. Of course, only too happy to oblige. I can't believe he's still not going to concede the point. What I in fact witnessed was a fellow grave robber.
Hold it!
A fellow grave robber? What are you talking about? Well, I wasn't the only one busy in the cemetery that night, you know. Other body snatchers were at work. Of course, when I saw one emerging from the hole he dug, my heart was very nearly stopped. So that's the terrifying sight I actually saw, you see. You're claiming it was just another student on equally salubrious business as yourself. Many of the medical students would wear metal masks to protect them from bacteria during dissections. Clearly the fellow was using such a mask to protect his anonymity, wouldn't you say?
Objection!
But there's more to the story, isn't there? The article goes on to say, in the next second, a gunshot rang out suddenly from behind. The bullet pierced the resurrected man's chest, whose breath then stilled once more. We might assume that the sexton discovered the miscreants at work, perhaps, and fired upon one of them. If a gravedigger had shot someone in the cemetery, I think it might have been rather big news, my lord. Ah, yes, well, I can only assume it was an embellishment bolted on later by the reporter.
Excuse me!
Madam Tusbles, don't take it out on Mr. Sholmes. Oh, la la, pardon. I was lost in my thoughts. Would it be fair to say that Mr. Drebber's last remark was significant to you in some way? I thought it was a little strange, that is all. How Monsieur Drebber could claim this now. If you don't mind me saying, madam, what are you talking about? Well, when I met you 10 years ago at your university dormitory, you recounted to me about your adventures in the cemetery, no? Including the gunshot. Stop. You might want to watch your tongue, you know.
Objection!
Have a care, Drebber. There's no way to speak to a lady. Please, Madam Tusbles, carry on. Of course. According to what Monsieur Drebber told me at the time, he did hear a gunshot from behind him and the bullet hit the condemned man. I said nothing of the sort. No, you were very explicit about the details. About the mask that the figure was wearing. And the blood that splattered over you when he was shot. The camera! Enough. Shut up, woman. You're making all this up. That will do. Mr. Drebber? Yes. You refute the account just given by Madame Tusbles. I have no recollection of ever saying those things. Come on, do you really expect us to believe you? Control yourself, counsel. I will not permit baseless accusations in my courtroom. Right. Under the circumstances, I think it best that you supplement your testimony with a statement to clarify your position on this, witness. Very well.
There was no gunshot from behind me at all. Okay, now the camera. Finally.
Objection!
Mr. Drebber, do you remember this camera? But that is the camera from that fateful night. Yes, we borrowed it from the House of Horrors. It's the camera you took with you to the cemetery that night, Mr. Drebber. And is that supposed to be significant? This kind of camera is rarely seen in our homeland, so my colleague and I were keen to examine it closely. We noticed that the lens extends forward on the end of the sun bellows. Like this.
Hold it!
What's that? That just on the bellows. It looks like a dark red stain.
That's right. It's a rather conspicuous mark here on the bellows, in fact.
Good lord, are you suggesting?
Yes, my lord. It would appear to be a spatter of blood. Something that could be confirmed with a simple chemical test. Isn't that right, Dr. Sid? It would be difficult to determine if it was human blood or not the blood of some animal. But yes, to test whether or not it's blood at all is simple enough. I propose that Madame Tuswell's testimony was correct, and that on the night in question, 10 years ago, you were spattered with blood from the gunshot wound. Well, And that, furthermore, you really did witness the condemned professor emerging from his tomb. There's simply no way you could have forgotten such a traumatic experience. In other words, the only explanation is that you're trying to hide the fact that you saw the professor that night.
Objection!
But why? Why would he want to do that? Well, not for his own gain, it would seem.
For whose, then? Who could benefit?
Mr. Drebber is obviously lying in order to protect somebody.
My goodness, he's shielding someone.
Yes, my lord, and clearly. It's someone who doesn't want the truth about the professor's coming back to life to be exposed.
Well, counsel, who is it then? Who is this witness trying to protect by lying about what he saw that night?
There has to be a reason Mr. Asbin's name is on the thing, right?
Take that!
Good gracious. That's certainly not the answer I was expecting.
Uh-oh, that's not the reaction I was expecting either. Suggest you go and called. Okay, is it Dr. Sid then? Yes. Shield you, even if I might less sly to do it. I'll tell him that such a terrible mistake is completely out of character.
I can't have Susato-san committing perjury for me. No, no more mistakes. I need to get this right, now.
Okay.
Take that!
The obvious answer is Dr. Sid.
Sid. Whatever do you mean?
Imagine if the convict who'd been sentenced to death was not in fact killed. Imagine if that was to come to light.
What are you insinuating?
And imagine if the convict in question was the country's most hated mass murderer. If it was the professor,
That would be an unprecedented scandal.
Objection!
This is beyond a joke. Need I point out that the dead cannot come back to life? What you're suggesting would mean that the execution never actually happened.
yes, that's exactly what it would mean.
Objection!
Once a man is sent to the gallows, he hangs. No one could escape, not in Great Britain.
Objection!
But the fact is, there was a witness to the fact that the man did escape his hanging.
If that were really true, Counsel, the implications of misconduct would not stop at the supervising coroner. It would take the honor of the entire judiciary from the ground up. And it's exactly because of those monumental repercussions that Dr. Sith would consent to any demand made of her by someone who threatened to expose the secret, even if that meant being complicit in the crime. You mean... I mean that Dr. Sith wasn't collaborating in Mr. Drebber's wicked scheme. She was coerced into collaborating in order to protect her decade-old secret. She switched the dead body of Mr. Asman with the waxwork model and fabricated the autopsy report. Ah! Lord Van Zeeks? Pray forgive my freshly filled hallowed chalice and a whole raft of other discourtesies now. Goodness me. It's just the sort of tall tale Londoners would enjoy, I grant you. An executed killer rising from the dead, a Scotland Yard cover-up, a conspiracy at the highest levels. So let me ask you one thing. What's that? If the condemned man really did emerge from his tomb that night, only to be shot in the chest, who pulled the trigger and disposed of him forever? Well, I had no idea at the moment. We have too little information to work that out at present, I think. I couldn't agree more. The Old Bailey is no place for wild fantasies. Ugh. And have you considered this, my learned Nipponese friend? Considered what? Do you realize just what a dangerous endeavor it would be to coerce this woman into such criminal activity? It's tantamount to declaring war on the entire British police force and judiciary. Quite hard to imagine any sum of money being offered for research could warrant it. To rely on some stage deception when so much is at stake would be madness. Well, I suppose. And this was no petty crime either. The victim was murdered. A man who'd already invested money in the venture and would be instrumental in future profits too. Yes, I had no reason to kill Mr. Asman at all. Or are you forgetting that his death results in me receiving not a single penny? The court is already aware of the contract between myself and the victim, no? There's the contract, that's very true. The motive for this case runs deep, though. I can feel it. Using threats to force the head of the forensic investigation team to cooperate is extreme. Especially for a government grant he had no guarantee of receiving in the first place. If the research grant was the aim, taking Mr. Asman's life would have made no sense anyway. Which means, Mr. Drebber's motive wasn't money at all. He was just trying to kill Mr. Asman. But why? Why was his motive then? What was his motive then? Your time is up, my learned friend. I'd say you have one last chance before the jury lose their patience with this charade. Let's see if you can back up your heady proposal, shall we? How do you explain why this engineer would throw all caution to the wind and threaten his own country? At this point, I'm not prepared to listen to more of this outlandish conjecture without proof. So, counsel, present your evidence. Alright, who exactly was Mr. Asman the Drebber? There's a connection there that no one's seen yet, and I'm going to have to present 2 pieces of evidence to show what it is. Yes, my lord. The evidence that establishes a motive and explains why the witness wanted the victim dead is right here.
Take that!
Mr. Drebber, I have here the contract that you signed with Mr. Asman. Yes, that's right. The very document, in fact. That proves I had no reason to kill the man. No, I'm afraid not. As it turns out, this contract actually helps to establish the real motive for the murder you committed.
It does? Well, I never.
What are you talking about? Read it again, you idiot. I'm not finished. In order to demonstrate what your motive really was, I need this contract and one other piece of evidence.
What other evidence?
Counsel, you will present your supplementary evidence without delay. Evidence which, when cross-referenced with the contract, establishes a motive for the deed.
Take that!
It's this newspaper article, my lord.
That was written 10 years ago.
Every detail has been examined already. What can it possibly tell us? That drivel should never have been written. It's typical gutter press nonsense that means nothing.
Objection!
But there's something significant that this newspaper article and the contract have in common.
Really?
And it's that common link that shows very clearly why you were determined to kill Mr. Odiasman.
It seems the defense has uncovered something the rest of us have missed.
So, my learned friend, point out what these two pieces of evidence have in common. Where exactly is the link between this newspaper and the contract?
Take that!
What these two pieces of evidence have in common is a signature.
A signature?
The signature on the illustration that accompanies the 10-year article and the signature on the contract belong to the same person.
What?
As the court has heard, this illustration was drawn 10 years ago by the newspaper reporter who found Mr. Drebber and interviewed him about his ordeal. If you look closely, the reporter's signature can be seen in the bottom right corner of the drawing. And if you look at the contract here, which was signed between the witness and the victim last year, you can clearly see Mr. Asman's signature on the bottom.
Let me see now. Good Lord, yes, they're identical.
In short, the journalist who drew the illustration and wrote the article published about Mr. Drebber 10 years ago was the victim of this case, Mr. Odiasman.
Objection!
But explain to the court why. Why would that constitute a motive for the witness to murder Asman?
Well, if you think back, you'll remember that Mr. Drebber talked about that article in his testimony.
Grave robbing, you say?
Yes, exhuming fresh corpses to sell is reasonably ludicrous.
That is quite beyond the pale. What are you doing?
Yes, well, I think I suffered retribution enough. The Daily Circus eventually unearthed my name and put it in print. It caused me a great many headaches. In the end, I had to leave the university. That was the only paper with the bad grace to identify me unambiguously, I might add. Then I gave up on my dream of becoming a scientist, and it was all because of that newspaper article. At the time, you were a student of the University of London who dreamt of becoming a scientist. However, this single newspaper article changed your entire life. So Mr. Asman used to be a newspaper journalist, did he?
He did, my lord.
In fact, it's a widely held belief that Asman managed to position himself at the heart of this criminal network, thanks to the many dubious connections he made during his time as reporter. So you had to give up on your dream and leave university. You lost everything. Eventually you found yourself working in the field of science, but only in the shadows. And all because of that article, written by Mr. Asman.
Enough!
stop this endless dribble about my life.
What?
Explain yourself, Mr. Dribber. Yes, it's true, I had to leave the university as a result of that article. But it was just the straw that broke the camel's back.
What do you mean?
Almost every student of science in the faculty was too poor to actually conduct any research. But they struggled on with their hypotheses anyway. We all did, only to have them taken by vultures. Sooner or later, you knew your ideas would be stolen and patented by some wretch or other, after all.
Good gracious.
Making a name for yourself as a scientist in a climate like that was a miracle only a select few geniuses could ever hope to achieve. Personally, I wasn't one of those geniuses, so it was hardly a wretch. Being forced out of the university because of Lowgate was the best thing that could have happened to me.
Objection!
Mr. Drebber, do you genuinely believe that?
Of course I do.
Who's better placed to know whether or not I possess a talent for science than me? I'm sorry to say that your words don't ring true at all.
How dare you?
And I have evidence to prove it.
How are you in a position to say anything about me?
I don't know you from Adam. Fine, if you think you have evidence, go ahead. Show it. What could you possibly have to disprove the idea that I was happy to leave university because I lacked talent? Excellency in science. Yes?
Take that!
Do you remember this, Mr. Drebber? We found it at your workshop.
Is that a Royal Society trophy for excellence in science?
What exactly is this trophy, Council? It's the greatest honor that can be bestowed on a young scientist, my lord. There is no higher accolade. It recognizes emerging talent and promises a bright future.
Good gracious.
Your prospects for the future were excellent, weren't they, Mr. Drebber? Because even then, you were a genius in your field. But you lost everything. You had no more future. Your talents would go to waste. Now, as a result of this one newspaper article, I don't know when you realized who Mr. Asman was, but when it dawned on you that he was the same journalist who 10 years ago ruined your life, it's abundantly clear that you had no intention of forgiving the man. The truth is, finally, he's gonna fold. Fine. Clearly this has run its course now.
What?
I admit it. All of it.
What? What are you doing?
It's exactly as the Japanese man said. I was coerced into going along with this man's plot to murder the victim, on the condition that he kept my dirty secret from 10 years ago.
No. Good Lord! Dr. Sill, do you realize what you're saying, woman?
It's all true. That day, when I arrived at the Crystal Tower and saw that birdcage, my heart nearly stopped beating. That memory from a decade ago that I'd done my best to bury deep inside myself. It was the professor again, staring me in the face. And then, before I had a chance to react, I noticed something else. There was a note tucked inside the model's jacket. Dr. Sid, you will go along with my plan. From someone who knows the truth about what really happened that night 10 years ago. All the instructions were there in the note. Every detail was meticulously written out. I had no choice but to do what it said. I made the necessary alterations to the scene and fabricated the autopsy report as instructed. There was really no other choice. It had to be done to protect the judiciary. I can only apologize now. Why on earth would you buckle now? Well, there's no point trying to hide it anymore, is there? I would have done anything to stop it coming out, even corroborate in a murder. But the great lie about that execution 10 years ago has been exposed. Whatever happens, I'm finished. So then, Mr. Drebber, what do you say to that? Your accomplice has admitted everything. Surely it goes without saying. You admit your part in it too, then? I admit nothing. At all. What? Have you forgotten that the kinesis machine was ripped to shreds by an explosion? Short of me admitting to a crime, there's really no possible way for you to prove I did anything wrong. No! Order. Whatever this man says, I admit everything. He threatened to expose my secret, so I went along with his plan. And Lord Van Zeeks? Yes. I hope you will accept my apologies. What happens next is in your hands, of course. I have heard more than enough now. I hereby present the final findings of this court. This trial is not the proper forum in which to pursue the alleged wrongdoings of Mr. Drebber. The defendant is Professor Albert Harebrant. Very true, it had slipped my mind. Isn't he one of your closest friends? As the court has heard, Dr. Sith has admitted to the allegations brought by the defense, thereby absolving the defendant of any possible guilt. You mean... At the present time, it is the conclusion of this court that the defendant was not involved in any wrongdoing. Does the prosecution have any objection? None, my lord.
Oh, congratulations, Mr. Naruhodo. You've proven Professor Harebrant's innocent.
Without further ado, then, the education, unless the prosecution or defense have any other matters to discuss. I don't know. This doesn't feel quite right. Why did Dr. Sid suddenly admit to it like that?
Is everything alright, Mr. Naruhodo?
Like you said before, the way the trial is set to end now. The judge will certainly deliver a verdict of not guilty. But is that really what we want? What the defense should be pushing for now is further testimony.
Objection!
The defense objects to the trial ending at this time, my lord. I beg your pardon. We demand one final testimony. What? You do realize I'm about to adjudicate in favor of your client, I presume. What are you playing at now, my Nipponese friend? Why would you want to obstruct the conclusion of the trial at this point? No defense lawyer in his right mind would do that.
Mr. Naruhodo, what exactly are you thinking?
The truth. The whole truth. And a way to bring it all out into the open.
Right.
Yes, in hindsight. Yes, one word of warning before I go. If, in the course of the trial this afternoon, you perceive even a shadow of doubt about the truth, don't let it out of your sight. Pursue it like a dog with a bone. To the bitter end, you understand. Do not falter, whatever may come to pass. I'm sure Mr. Sholmes knew. He must have deduced that this would happen. Yes, I'm here in court to advocate for my client, and to secure an acquittal. Obviously. But that's not all. I believe that I have a duty to the court, to pursue the whole truth of the case until every last detail is laid bare. And that is why the defense calls for further testimony from Dr. Sid. Testimony from me? About what? About the nature of your collaboration with Mr. Knockdrubber. Huh, in case it escaped your attention, I've already admitted to everything I did. The whole truth has already been revealed. So stop wasting everyone's time. As his lordship made very plain, your client will get the acquittal you wanted for him. There's simply no point protracting this business further with another tedious cross-examination.
Objection!
Pray forgive my careless handling of that hollowed bottle. I slipped. That's what you call it? What is your objection, Lord Van Zieks? The prosecution also calls for supplementary testimony from the witness.
Don't be stupid.
If there is more to this case than it has yet come to light, then I will join my learned friend in pursuing the facts until the bitter end.
You what?
Lord Van Zieks. This is most irregular, to say the least. However, as the prosecution also calls for it, I will uphold the request. Dr. Sid, you will testify for the court, explaining the full extent of your involvement in the murder apparently committed by Mr. Drebber. Very well. It all began at the scene when I saw the waxwork in the note tucked inside its jacket. The actual body of the victim, as indicated in the note's instructions, was beneath the experimentation stage. The body had to be arranged in certain ways to implicate the defendant, which was my job. I enlisted the help of the entire forensic investigation team to dress the scene appropriately. The truth about the execution 10 years ago is a state secret of the highest level. I had to protect it. So I was right. The stage and the machine were all specially designed for deception. So it seems, and all meticulously prepared. You did well to see through it. You are a very shrewd boy. So kind of you to say.
And what about this autopsy report then?
All I did was record the location of the body as being in the Crystal Tower instead of under the stage.
That's all? That's a terrible corruption.
Only my team were aware of the deceit, and then only under my explicit instructions. Nobody else at Scotland Yard knew anything about it, I assure you. We must be thankful for small mercies, I suppose. Well, I believe that testimony has clarified everything. There's no particular need for a cross-examination, I would say. No, I disagree. I can't shake the feeling that something's wrong. Just look at that expression on Dr. Sid's face. It's the defense's right to cross-examine any witness following testimony. What is it about you Japanese that makes you all so dogged doggedly persistent. Very well. If you so desire, counsel, proceed with the cross-examination. Yes, my lord. I'll begin at arranged.
Hold it!
When you say arranged, I presume you mean with this. Yes, the instructions in the engineer's notes that's along the lines of fabricate some evidence to make it clear that Harebrain alone could have killed Asmund. So, you mean that was your doing? I fetched Harebrain's ridiculous screwdriver from the stage, and took it with me, alone, to the abyss under the stage where the birdcage had fallen. Alone, Doctor? I didn't feel it would be appropriate to involve anybody else in that particular part of the deception. There was a void under the stage where I found the birdcage lying in the dirt. I approached it, leaned down, and slowly opened it up. Then, I took the screwdriver in both hands, and plunged it into the man's chest. And then you noted that in your fake autopsy report as a fictitious cause of death. Exactly. So, the actual cause of death was the trauma resulting from the 30-foot drop. My word. What is it, Mrs. Otto? Something about Dr. Sid's last statement is playing on my mind, that's all. Yes, mine too. Dr. Sid? There's really no need to shout. I can hear you perfectly well. The defense calls for you to add what you just said to your formal testimony. Oh, which part? What I want her to supplement her testimony with is what she did. How you stabbed Mr. Asmund in the chest, that part. Fine, if that's what you want, but there's really no need to point. The prosecution concurs. Very well, you will supplement your testimony now, witness. If you wish, my lord. I stood over the victim's corpse where it lay in the toppled cage and plunged the screwdriver into the chest. Okay. Should have prepared stabbing.
Objection!
I've got a nasty feeling that this inconsistency points to an extremely uncomfortable truth. What on earth is the matter, counsel? Have you lost your tongue? I apologize, my lord. Dr. Sid, in that last statement of yours, there's just one point that seems to defy explanation. Out with it, my learned friend. There's an obvious inconsistency between your description and this photograph, which shows the victim in the birdcage following the events that led to his death.
Objection!
The court has already examined that photograph in depth. There's nothing new we can learn from it.
Objection!
Yes, we have already considered it, that's true. But we now know the facts to be different. What do you mean? I believe we should let the defense explain. Where in this photograph will we see the alleged inconsistency with the witness's statement?
this.
Take that!
Look closely at the blood stain on the victim's chest. It clearly extends in a downward direction towards the man's feet. And why is that significant, counsel? If the victim was stabbed moments before the kinesis machine was set in motion, that's entirely expected. Ah, of course, no, that's not what happened. Exactly, my lord. Dr. Sid made it very clear in her testimony just now that at the point at which she stole Professor Harebrain's screwdriver and stabbed the victim, was after the grand deception was set in motion, when the birdcage had fallen below the stage out of sight. From the shape of it, it's clear that the birdcage would have fallen on its side after the 30-foot drop. And if the victim had really been stabbed whilst inside the birdcage in that position, the blood from the wound would have spread out equally in all directions. For it to have formed this longitudinal appearance we see in the picture is inconceivable. Given that the victim's blood seeped vertically downward from the wound, it must be the case that when you stabbed Mr. Asmund, he was standing up. In short, Dr. Sid, your latest testimony was a total fabrication. Ugh. Ugh. I knew it. I was right. Now I've identified that contradiction. There's only one way to explain the facts. We've all been under a great misapprehension here. What? What sort of misapprehension? Dr. Sid, you claim you were coerced into helping Dr. Drebber as a result of the note he left in the waxwork. You claim that he made changes to the scene of the crime to implicate the defendant. And you claim that you authored a fake autopsy report to cover your tracks. But one of those claims is an out-and-out lie. Because the question of what the bloodstain really tells us has only one possible answer. If that is the case, what is it, man? Counsel, you've clearly struck upon a revelation. Now tell the court what it is. Which part of Dr. Sid's story is shown to be a lie? Stabbing. The answer is very simple if you consider the sequence of events. If, when the victim was stabbed, the blood from the wound seeped downwards as it did, we could be sure that the victim must have been either sitting or standing upright at the time. But as you rightly pointed out, the birdcage would have fallen on its side when it fell beneath the stage. Yes, it would, which tells us that the victim must have been in that position of his own accord.
Objection!
That's impossible. The man was dead, remember? No, that is the misapprehension. When the birdcage fell from the stage into the void below, it must have hit the ground with considerable force. Mr. Asmund didn't die in the fall. He probably lost consciousness for a while, but when he came round, he got to his feet to climb out of the cage. Just as Dr. Sid appeared. If the victim was in fact alive at that point in time, it changes everything. Mr. Odie Esmond's killer wasn't the defendant, Professor Albert Harebrain, nor was it the mastermind behind the stage trickery, Mr. Knock Drebber. It was you, Dr. Courtney Sid. Order, order, order.
Can this possibly be true? Have you been taking me for a fool? It was you, was it? You killed him. You hoped that by admitting to being an accomplice in Mr. Gerber's scheme, the trial would end. Before you were accused of far worse crime. Cold-blooded murder. Oh, do shut up. You're so desperate now, you're making all this up. As if I would do something like that.
Objection!
I assure you, the defense is not desperate, Doctor. Mr. Naruhodo has established the facts using evidence and logic alone. Ha! Logic. Don't make me laugh. Sadly, your logic has a gaping hole in it. What? What do you mean? I'd have thought it was obvious. A motive, boy. You're lacking a motive. What possible reason would I have to kill Mr. Aswin? Aswin was involved in any number of criminal activities, from coercion to theft to murder. But there's no known connection to Dr. Sid there. I'm rather relieved to say it does seem somewhat far-fetched. True, there's no obvious motive, but there's still something in the back of my mind. I feel sure I've seen something somewhere that hints at why the coroner might have done this. Yes, I might have tampered with the crime scene and concocted a fake report. But murdering someone for no reason is a very different story.
Objection!
No, when you question what possible reason you could have for wanting to kill Mr. Asman, something did come to mind. What? What was it, counsel? Enlighten the court at once. Yes, we saw it yesterday, didn't we? Something that seemed strange, but we had no reason to suspect it at the time. There's a particular object that explains why Dr. Sid would have wanted to kill Mr. Asman. All the scalpels. But why? It's a scalpel, or rather scalpels. Did you say scalpels? It would appear that word has struck a chord, Doctor. You... come on, out with it. It was yesterday when we visited your laboratory. Look at this big, thick book here. Ah, it appears to be an accounting ledger. It's a record of the forensic investigation team's spending, I think. Oh? What is it? It's clear that the team purchases various equipment and supplies on a monthly basis, but... well, one entry seems rather strange. Really? In what way? They're buying 500 scalpels every month. $500 scalpels a month? At first, I wondered what on earth you could be using that many scalpels for. But actually, I realize now it's not the scalpels themselves that are significant. It's the money for them, disappearing every month from the department's accounts. Asman's criminal organization relied heavily on extortion for its funding. Tracing the money from the forensic investigation team's account to find out where it was going would be extremely straightforward. 10 years ago, when Mr. Asman was still a journalist and wrote this article about Mr. Drebber, he may well have stumbled upon information as he was researching the story. Information relating to Dr. Sid's darkest secret that he would use to rack money from her for the next decade. Her darkest secret? Good lord, you mean... I don't know what happened on the night of that execution 10 years ago. But clearly the opportunity to rid yourself of that menace was too tempting to pass up. So, in the end, you weren't coerced at all, were you? You did it entirely of your own free will. You stabbed Mr. Asman in the heart with all your might. To silence the blackmailer who knew your dark secret forever. You'll never understand. None of you. What we've had to keep covered up all these long years.
As very little of the machine remains after it was ripped apart by the bomb, the truth of this case can never be properly established unless you speak out. And if you decide not to, it's very possible that Courtney Sid will escape punishment for her crimes. Please, sir, own up to what you've done, and tell the court the truth about what happened.
10 years ago, you told the truth, and you were robbed of a bright and successful future as a result. I can certainly understand your bitterness and your consternation now, however. This is surely the chance you've been waiting for. Sever the hold that fate had over you all these years. Super high voltage, instantaneous kinesis. I mean, really. It's the addle-brained mock scientists that are the worst, you know. They don't recognize the fact that they don't have talent. They can't even get that right. And so they end up chasing impossible dreams, having unbridled faith in their abilities. They go on and on about their wonderful hypotheses, their stupid eyes shining like a little child's. They make me sick. I can't abide their foolishness. Careful, Mr. Drebber. I was particularly pleased with the kinesis machine. It made for quite a show, didn't it? So you admit it. You admit that it was nothing more than a sham made for the purpose of killing the victim. Yes, I admit it. I did it all in the name of revenge. Revenge for the future that Mr. Asmund's article had deprived you of 10 years earlier. But the revenge you sought didn't stop at Asmund, did it? Which is where that very particular waxwork comes in. Yes, I see.
The condemned convict that you saw rising from the grave in Lowgate Cemetery 10 years ago. If your account of those events was all true.
Then obviously Scotland Yard couldn't afford to acknowledge what had happened. Even if it meant discrediting a bright young man and crushing any future career he might have had. So, your plan required that you abduct that particular waxwork model, in order to exact your revenge on Scotland Yard as well, or on Dr. Sid to be precise. It was a year ago. By some extraordinary twist of fate, Asmund turned up at my workshop. He didn't remember who I was, of course. He just wanted to employ my services as an engineer. And he happened to have a paper with him. An article on the front page caught my eye, about the coroner who'd handled that bogus autopsy being appointed head of a new forensic team. When I learnt that news, my cognitive processes started to devise the plan.
What a horrid tale.
He robbed me of my future, so I wanted to use the man's own wiles against him for revenge. And had that rotten Scotland Yard eating out of my hand at the same time. I wanted them all to suffer the same humiliation I'd had to suffer. Your actions against those who'd ruin your future were justified as revenge, at least to yourself. Certainly, no one has the right to destroy another's prospects, especially for purely selfish gain. And yet, in carrying out your plans, you did exactly that to someone else, didn't you? Did I? Professor Harebrain's only crime was passion for his hypothesis, but you had no compunction about sacrificing his future to effect a revenge. You knew that he would be forever branded a failure and a fraud. Perhaps life treated you unfairly 10 years ago, and others' misconduct left your life in tatters. But remember this. Your own actions resulted in exactly the same thing for another perfectly innocent young man. I... Lord Van Zeeks, what of Dr. Sid? An immediate warrant for her arrest has been granted, and she's been remanded in custody, my lord. I presume she will face trial in the coming days along with Mr. Drebber. A most regrettable situation indeed. She's made great contributions to her profession over the years. It really is a hard truth to swallow. However, that is a topic for some future occasion. For now, Professor Harebrain... Oh, yes. It seems there was a great deal more to your experiment than you realized. However, I think we can assume now that all the sordid details have been brought to light. This has been a very long and profound trial, but I'm pleased to say you are absolved of all guilt. This whole experience has taught me a very great but painful lesson. This dedicated scientist, this devotee of natural philosophy. I've been selfish and self-centered and, above all, a fool. Professor, I've spent my life thinking of nothing but my research, misguidedly believing that I could do whatever I set my mind to, despite my lack of talent. And the worst of it is, in the process, I've caused others pain and misery. Others who are far, far greater people than I. No, Professor, that's not true. What? Don't tar yourself with the same brush as Drebber. What happened was his doing and his alone. This outcome is his fate, not yours. You're not to blame in any way. Lord Van Zeeks, and the derision with which he referred to you earlier, calling you a fool, talentless even. The man has no idea. To believe in yourself and work your finger to the bone to realize your dreams, that's laudable, not laughable. No one has the right to deride another for such choices. Oh. Thank you, Barrick. So, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, yes, my lord, it is the court's expectation that you find the defendant not guilty of the charge of which he stands accused. I presume there are no objections? None from me, my lord? Certainly not. This trial has really made me think, but this is the right decision. It's all been proven methodically and rigorously. I have no misgivings whatsoever.
What's that? He's done, is he? It's all over.
I don't know what's become of the yard these days. I don't recognize the place. Very well. In that case, I hereby pronounce the defendant not guilty. Court is adjourned. It's over. That was some trial. $433. Professor, what a splendid outcome, isn't it?
Oh, it is, it is! Congratulations, Professor Hairbrain.
Mr. Naruhodo, Miss Susato, I am truly beside myself with gratitude. How could I ever thank you enough? I'm just glad it's all been cleared up, that you realize you were just caught up in a bad situation. Right now, you know, if I had that research grant money, I'd give the whole lot to you, every penny. Well, that's very kind, but I'm just a student, so...
We don't need any financial reward. Your acquittal is more than enough.
Oh dear. Oh, what could I do? How about this as a memento? The paper about my hypothesis is inside. Well, just as a memento then, thank you.
I've been wondering, Professor, what are you gonna do now?
Oh my. Yes, what am I going to do? My hypothesis and my great machine lie in ruins. But still, it's been too long since I was last in London, so perhaps I'll enjoy some sightseeing. I must explore the great exhibition whilst I'm here too, and see if new inspiration hits me.
Oh yes, that's a wonderful idea. I
can't allow that. Lord Van Zeeks, what are you doing in here? Barrick! I'm sorry you had to go through that, Albert. Well, if I'm honest, it was terrifying. You were like a great demon behind your bench there, snarling down on your prey. You're one of the few true friends I have. I couldn't leave it to anybody else to handle the prosecution. Or the defense. Sorry, or the defense? Did I just hear that right? I always knew that you had my best interests at heart. Don't worry. How about you show me around while I'm here in town? It's been a long time since we left university. We have a lot to catch up on. Listen, Albert. In a few days, your acquittal will be made official. When that happens, you must head straight to Dover. I'll accompany you. What? From there, you'll cross the channel and make your way back to Germany. I've already purchased the tickets. But no! Hold on a minute, Barrick. What about the great exhibition? This is the chance of a lifetime for me. I want to look around. No sightseeing, Albert. Give up on the idea. Sometimes it's hard to see any warmth in those eyes, Barrick. Lord Van Zeeks. What's all this about? A necessary precaution.
Yes, I think I understand.
You do?
Well, Iris told me that when he met Lord Van Zeeks at his office some days ago. He asked how Mr. Natsume was doing.
Yes, that's right. I remember being surprised at the time and thinking it was nice of him to ask.
The point is, Mr. Natsume is still alive and well, even though it's been more than 6 months now since he stood trial with the Reaper as the prosecutor.
You mean the Reaper's influence doesn't stretch overseas? Those in the Reaper's sights meet their ends days or sometimes months after their acquittal. That being the pattern up to now.
But of course, we know that both Mr. Natsume and Gina were completely innocent.
True. And perhaps that governs the Reaper's actions. The truly innocent are spared. But I don't want to take any chances with a close personal friend. Barrick! Like this mustached Nipponese, this man should leave the country without delay. That's why I'm packing him off to Germany at once.
Right. Does your friend-shaped package get any say in it? Goodness, was that your intention all along then, Lord Van Zeeks?
In court, where people think of him as the Reaper, this man seems absolutely merciless, and yet sometimes I feel as though I don't understand him at all. It's time to go, Albert. Back to the prison for the time being.
Yes, alright. Well then, Mr. Naruhodo. Thank you so much for everything.
Not at all, Professor. It was a pleasure getting to know you.
Best wishes, Professor Hairbrain. Well, once the dust has settled, you must come and visit me in Germany. Anyway, goodbye for now.
Now, my Nipponese friend.
Oh, yes, I thought you'd gone too.
We have matters to discuss. Can you spare me some time?
You want to talk with me?
I'll be waiting in the courtroom in 10 minutes.
Well, that was strange. For some reason, I didn't get that sense of impending doom as he walked away this time. The enigma, Barak von Zeeks. What does he want to discuss, I wonder? The answer awaits in the courtroom, I suppose. Here goes then. .458. Who is the man?
So, are you satisfied? You saved a guileless scientist from a great injustice.
Yes, I think so. I'm relieved, at least, that the man's innocence could be proven.
Anyway, I imagine you've been wondering where my animosity towards you Nipponese come from.
Well, at first I thought you just didn't like me. I imagine you saw me as a pretentious child from an unimportant land who has no business being here. But now I think differently. You clearly know our ways, so I would guess that some specific incident led to your thorough dislike of my race. Will you tell me what happened, please?
The professor. I thought I'd never hear that name in this courtroom again, to be honest.
He took your brother's life.
Clint. My brother was Clint Van Zeeks. 16 years ago, when I was still just in my teens. He was already the director of prosecutions and a key member of the judiciary. I looked up to him. He was everything I aspired to be. He was involved in the establishment of justice systems in foreign countries as well. There was exchange programs between Britain and other nations then too to share knowledge and ideas. As part of one of those programs, 3 judicial students came to Britain from your homeland, the Empire of Japan.
Oh, if it was 16 years ago, then one of them could have been my father.
Of course. I remember Dr. Mikotoba well.
I had no idea.
I was a minor at the time, training at the prosecutor's office. One day, Clint introduced me to the 3 visiting Nipponese.
So, you've actually met my father?
He and his colleagues were polite and amicable. They were adept in their work and exacting in their standards. It was my first encounter with the Nipponese spirit, and it made a very great impression upon me. But 6 years later, that's when it happened. The investigation was going nowhere. There were no suspects even, just an ever-growing list of victims. And in the end, my brother became one of them. The last, in fact, before the case was finally resolved. I'm so sorry, Lord Van Zeeks. Truly. Clint was always ready to put his life on the line for justice anyway, so he wouldn't have wanted it any other way. He lost his life to the killer, but it was his victory in the end. For me personally, though, it was a great loss. I found myself in a very dark place indeed. When I finally found out the killer's identity, the reason why no one had been able to catch the man sooner ceased to be such a mystery. He'd been hiding in plain sight all the time.
In plain sight?
Are you aware of political events 10 years ago? It was a period of extremely sensitive diplomacy between the British and Japanese empires. A new treaty was being forged, I think? Correct. The Anglo-Japanese Treaty of Friendship and Navigation was being concluded. The leaders of both countries were deep in extensive political discussions, which is why this particular killer's appearance in court was conducted as a closed trial. If the British public had known the identity of the killer, not only would the treaty have been in jeopardy, but our two nations could very well have ended up at war.
What? A war between Britain and Japan? But that would mean... Oh my, you mean to say the professor was...
When the trial reached its conclusion earlier, I thought to myself, yes, it's time. Time for you to come face to face with this hideous monster. I borrowed the key for the mask from the proprietress of the Waxwork Museum. So see for yourselves now. Confirm it with your own eyes. The truth that's been hidden this past decade.
That's the professor?
Yes, that's him.
Until now, the thought never even crossed my mind. That the mass murderer, whose crimes shook Britain as never before, was Japanese.
Wait a minute. That face. I feel as though I've seen it somewhere. It's strangely familiar.
Father.
What? Father? Kazuma! My best friend, Kazuma Asogi. After a whole year, finally his memories returned. As he stood there before me, Ryunosuke. Hello again. My friend.
Kazuma-sama!
Judicial Assistant Mikotoba.
It's been a very long road. Thank you. Thank you for guiding my friend here when I could not.
It was an honor.
I knew you wouldn't die that easily. Kazuma.
I owe you thanks, too. For taking good care of that in my absence.
Oh. Karuma, the great blade of the Asogi clan, passed down through the generations. When we left Japan, this sword was at my friend's side. A Japanese man's katana is his soul, and he couldn't be parted from it. But then, when the incident happened, it was Susato-san's wish that I inherit the sword, and I've kept it with me ever since, along with my memories of the friendship we shared. With this by my side, I always felt that you were watching over me somehow.
I've made it. At last.
Father. Are you saying... Surely not. You mean... you knew all this time? I'm looking at it. But... I still can't believe it. This mass murderer is Kazuma's father.
Kazuma-sama.
Ryunosuke, we have much to talk about. But now is not the time. I'll be seeing you.
That's all Kazuma said. Before he turned and left us there, in the courtroom.
Jeesh. So he's a living after-image of the man who took my brother's life, is he? Yes, Kazuma Asogi, my best friend. 3 months ago, when Lord Strongheart introduced us, I had an inkling there was something there, some connection. But why did Lord Strongheart do that? Why did he make Kazuma Lord Van Zeek's apprentice? And when was he suffering when he was suffering amnesia too? The man was apprehended, even executed. But his legacy just won't die. That's the sad truth. Anyway, that's all I had to say. I thank you for meeting with me as I asked.
Years ago, my grandmother took me to the railway station. We were there to meet my father from the train. For me. It was the first time I'd ever seen him. Poor Susato-san. All this is tied up with painful memories for her, too. She's never talked about this with me before, though. It took time to adjust to having father around, but just when I was starting to get used to it, he called me into his study one day. He told me that a great friend of his had passed away in London, and that the friend had left behind a son, a boy 7 years my senior. Father told me the boy had made a promise to his late father, or so he was studying to become a defense lawyer. I wanted to help, so I studied to become a qualified judicial assistant. As I'm sure you've worked out, that young man's name was Kazuma Asogi. So you see, that's how he and I met.
For a brief moment, my great friend had returned, only to disappear again all too soon. But in that fleeting encounter, something stirred. Something that had been dormant for a long time. As if great wheels had been set in motion. I could almost hear them creaking into life. In some ways, it was the end of a chapter, but in many, it was the start of a new one.
Yay. Okay, I'm gonna end it here. I'm speechless, honestly. That was a lot to take in. So next time I'll start the Twisted Karma and his last bow investigation, blah blah blah. We'll see whatever that is. So stay tuned, and I'll catch you on the next